What's unfolding right now in Iran and across the Gulf is an enormous story with far-reaching geopolitical and military implications. Thoughtful, it's likely to stay in focus for months, possibly even years. But beyond the politics and conflict, it's important to start breaking down the economic side of this situation. That analysis will take time, but some immediate effects are already becoming clear. One of the biggest concerns is energy costs, especially gas prices, which we'll come to shortly because they are critically important. Concerned. There's a real possibility that the cost of living pressures people thought were easing could return again, which is worrying. To understand why, we need to look at the bigger picture. This isn't just about economics, it's also about geography and geology. The Gulf region, including countries like Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Iran, holds the largest concentration of energy resources anywhere on Earth. When we talk about energy here, we're referring not just to natural gas, but also to crude oil, which is especially significant. If we look at the largest oil fields in the world, the places where crude oil is extracted, it's striking that 4 out of the top 5 are located in this very region. The largest of all is in Saudi Arabia, often described as the elephant among oil fields, and it played a central role in transforming Saudi Arabia into a major petroleum powerhouse. The second largest is in Kuwait, another massive source of oil. The third is located in China, but then the fourth is in Iran, and the fifth sits just off the coast of the UAE. Nowhere else on the planet has this level of concentration. What stands out even more is that all of these major energy sources are connected to the same geographic bottleneck. If oil is being shipped from places like Saudi Arabia's key export terminals, it must pass through a narrow waterway known as the Strait of Hormuz. This channel sits with Iran to the north and is essential for almost all maritime traffic entering or leaving the Gulf. For years, analysts have warned that if this route were ever blocked or restricted, it would create a major global problem. The reason this is such a critical issue is simple. An enormous volume of goods flows through that narrow passage, not just oil, but a wide range of essential commodities. In terms of sheer tonnage, crude oil dominates because of the massive tankers transporting it, but it's far from the only thing moving through there. Liquefied natural gas also passes through, along with petrochemicals, fertilizers, and even food supplies like grains, which are imported into the region. What's even more striking is how much the global supply of certain products depends on this single route. For example, roughly 34% of the world's fertilizer supply moves through this strait. That means about 1/3 of global fertilizer, critical for food production, relies on this narrow channel to reach markets worldwide. So this isn't just about fuel, it also affects agriculture, pharmaceuticals, and multiple industrial sectors. At its core, this situation is about a geographic choke point. When you look at recent shipping activity, the impact becomes very clear. Before tensions escalated, traffic through the strait was flowing normally, but as soon as news of attacks involving Iran emerged, shipping activity began to slow. Fewer vessels were moving through, and many started gathering outside the strait, effectively waiting for guidance on whether it was safe to proceed. Within a short period, traffic dropped dramatically, down by about 75%. Where roughly 100 ships would typically pass through daily, that number fell to just a handful. Even if the route isn't officially closed, the fear and uncertainty alone are enough to disrupt normal operations, and that disruption has immediate consequences for oil prices. In fact, prices jumped around 9% in a single day. If the strait were partially or fully shut, the increase could be far more dramatic. The scale of the price surge would depend on how effectively alternative routes could be used, but the risks are clearly significant. There are some alternative options, but they come with limitations. For instance, Saudi Arabia can use its east-west pipeline to transport oil across the country to the Red Sea, allowing shipments to bypass the Strait of Hormuz. From there, oil can move through routes like the Suez Canal or head south through another strategic passage known as the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. However, these alternatives have their own challenges. Capacity is limited, meaning they can't fully replace the volume normally handled by tankers in the Gulf. On top of that, the Bab el-Mandeb area has also faced security issues, including attacks on shipping vessels. So now there are effectively 2 major choke points creating uncertainty. While ships can reroute around Africa via the Cape of Good Hope, this adds significant time and cost, making it a less efficient option. And unlike other routes, there is no true substitute for the Strait of Hormuz when it comes to moving energy in and out of the Gulf. That's why markets are reacting so nervously. But the situation goes beyond transportation. Another major concern is production itself. Key energy facilities in the region have come under threat. For example, Ras Tanura in Saudi Arabia, one of the largest oil export terminals in the world, is critical for processing and shipping crude from major fields. Similarly, Ras Laffan in Qatar, the world's largest liquefied natural gas terminal, plays a vital role in global gas supply. Reports indicate that these types of facilities have faced attacks, and in the case of Ras Laffan, operations have even been temporarily halted. This raises a second major risk. Not only could it become harder to transport energy, but production itself could be disrupted. And that matters because the Gulf is also home to one of the largest gas reserves in the world, known as the North Field. This massive gas field is shared between Qatar and Iran and actually contains more energy overall than many of the largest oil fields. For regions like Europe, this is particularly important. Countries such as the UK are becoming increasingly dependent on imported gas, especially from Qatar. Domestic production in areas like the North Sea is expected to decline over time, while agreements are in place to significantly increase Qatari gas imports in the coming years. By around 2035, a substantial portion of the UK's gas supply could come from Qatar, potentially even surpassing domestic sources. That growing dependence explains the sharp reaction in gas markets. Prices in the UK have surged dramatically, rising by about 50% in just one day. While current levels are still below the peak seen in 2022, the speed of this increase is notable. In fact, it's the largest single-day jump since the early stages of the Russia-Ukraine conflict. This kind of movement signals serious concern about what might come next. All of this points to a troubling possibility. Just as many economies were beginning to recover from the previous energy crisis and the pressure on living costs, new tensions in the Middle East could trigger another wave of rising prices. The hope is that the situation stabilizes, but based on current economic signals, there's a real risk that energy shocks and the broader cost of living challenges could return once again.